In this video, I'm going to cover my entire investing portfolio. Yes, that includes my pension, my investment accounts, my ISA accounts, my crypto, absolutely everything. And what I might do is turn this almost into a Road to Retirement series where I cover basically everything on a quarterly basis and show you my progress towards retirement essentially. And this will also cover not just my investment, but my spouse's investments. That's because when you're married, investing is a joint effort. You're both working towards retirement. So I thought it makes sense that I cover my investments, but also my spouse's investments, because you have to look at the entire picture in order to understand when you can actually retire based on your own individual needs. Before I jump straight into the numbers, if you do like this video, please consider liking and subscribing, as it really helps the channel grow. So looking on the left hand side, we've got all the investments that I actually have, and these are a combination of my investments, a combined investment which is just a pension there, and any specific to my spouse, which are the Trading 212 ISA and the Vanguard ISA. I have the majority of the numbers for a lot of these accounts since 25th of August 2023. There are some gaps which I'll touch on, but obviously as I make these updates on a quarterly basis, I'll keep those numbers up to date and just show you how the overall investment portfolio is performing. So let's look at the numbers starting from 25th of August 2023. So the pension, so a bit of context, me and my spouse have been working for over 10 years and we're both contributing to a workplace pension. So what that is we contribute a certain percentage of our salary and the company either matches or beats that. And the value of the pension at 25th August 2023 was £106,160. I'm in a very fortunate position because my company has an absolutely amazing pension scheme. So I actually put in 6% of my salary every year and the company adds on top of that 12%. So that's effectively me tripling my money before that pension has even a chance of compounding growth, because that pension fund is essentially a global world ETF or an index fund. And yeah, it's a no-brainer, and it's going to be one of the key drivers for me and my wealth going forward. Next up, we have the free trade stocks and shares ISA. So the value of this was £56,108. I've been putting money into this ISA since December 2021. I've been maximising that £20,000 limit. And the plan going forward is I'm going to continue to maximize it if I can, because it's a very tax efficient way to grow your money. So if you don't know, the capital gains and dividends you make from anything within the ISA is not subject to tax. So it's a great way to grow your money in a very tax efficient way. Next up, we have the two general investment accounts. So I have a free trade general investment account, and the value of that was £13,714. And the second is a Vanguard general investment account, which the value of that was £10,923. And these two portfolios I'm actually tracking on my portfolio update series. Again, check that out if you haven't already. A question you might have is, why do I have two general investment accounts? Because they're taxable from a capital gains point of view and dividend tax. And the reason was I created these accounts during the COVID period. So luckily I got into investing probably when just before COVID hit. So when things started to really tank, that's when I got into the market, and obviously that's a great opportunity because I got great stocks at great prices. So at that point, I've already maxed out my stocks and shares ISA, and I still had money on the sidelines to invest. So I created these two general investment accounts, and I bought high quality companies. The Vanguard is made up of purely the S&P 500, where the free trade is made up of some of the bigger tech stocks and a few smaller companies. And a lot of those companies already made huge gains, like Meta, for example, has made a 200+% gain. So it was a good investment at the time, but really I'm trying to maximize the tax efficient wrappers for the ISA and pension before I even consider a general investment account. One option going forward is, if I'm unable to maximize either my stocks and shares ISA or my spouse's, I can liquidate some of these positions and then put it into those ISAs. Obviously, that would be subject to capital gains tax, but it's just an option on the table. Next up, we have my work shares. So the value of this was $10,215. So I work for a large UK-based company, and they have a scheme where essentially if I buy a certain number of their shares, they throw in a certain percentage for free. So that's quite beneficial because I essentially get that stock at a great price. So I've been buying those shares since I joined the company, and I'm up a fair bit. So it's not a huge amount I put in every month, but it is beneficial and it's something I'm looking to do going forward. Obviously, that's another option where if I can't maximize my ISA, I could potentially liquidate some of this position. Next up is Coinbase. So this is effectively where I manage and buy and sell all of my crypto. Unfortunately, I couldn't get the exact value of this portfolio at that specified date. But if I had to hazard a guess, it will probably be in the £6,000 to £7,000 range. I have effectively only bought 2 cryptos in this portfolio. That is majority in Bitcoin and the small amount in Ethereum. And it's a very small percentage of my portfolio, as you'll see, but I do want some exposure to it, and that's why I've got it. Next up are 2 additional stocks and shares ISA. One is Trading 212 and the second is Vanguard. So these are my spouse's ISAs. Obviously, their value is 0 because I just wasn't married at the time. But if you didn't know that, £20,000 stocks and shares ISA limit applies per person. So obviously if you're married, that's double. So I have a £20,000 limit and my spouse has another £20,000 limit. So working together, we can effectively put in £40,000 every single year. And that is the plan rather than invest in the GIAs or a bit more crypto. I'm planning on using these tax efficient wrappers to really maximize our investment growth going forward. So the total of all of those investments back in August 2023 was £197,120. Next up, we'll take a look at the figures for 12th of January 2024. And if you've been keeping track of the market, you know the market has done exceptionally well in the past year. If we just take a quick look at the FTSE World ETF, in the past year, it has had a gain of 22.44%, which is absolutely crazy if you think about it for an ETF. Obviously, the average return for a all-world ETF is around probably 8.2%. So this is not what you should expect on a yearly basis, and that's why some of the numbers might look quite good. But bear in mind, I'm a long-term investor. I've got another probably 15, 20 years of investing, depending on how my portfolio grows, of just growing my wealth, buying stocks, accumulating. So I'm in it for the long term and not the short term. The pension grew from 106,000 to 122. Bear in mind, this is the additional contributions plus any growth. You can start to see how when you get to the 100,000 figure range, how that wealth can really compound and that compound interest really starts to kick in. Next up, the free trade stock and shares ISA grew from around 56,000 to 72. Again, a nice bump up, but a large portion of that ISA is in the Palantir stock. I've got around, can't remember last time I checked, around 50% of my portfolio is Palantir, which can be a very volatile stock. So I expect this number to fluctuate quite a bit every single update, but a nice bump up in terms of that overall price in my ISA. The 2 GIAs had a modest bump up in overall value. So the free trade GIA went from 13.7 to 15.7. And I think I haven't really been adding too much at that point. And the Vanguard GIA went from 10.9 to 13.4. And I had a direct debit set up where I was adding £200 every single month into the S&P 500. My work shares went from about 10.2 to 11.9, which is, again, a nice little bump up. Obviously, the performance of this is dependent on how my company is growing. So, don't expect to see huge fluctuations unless we perform really well or obviously crash. But it's probably going to be modest upgrades every single month. Then no change in the Coinbase of the other 2 ISAs. So the total value is 236,628, which was a 20% gain from August 2023. So obviously a very nice performance there, but the market was performing well. So a lot of that performance should be in line with that. Next up, let's look at the numbers for 19th of April 24, so roughly 3 months later. So the pension, again, continues to compound, went from 122 to 132, and the free trade ISA went from around 72.5 to 86.3, so again, continuing to grow quite nicely. The free trade GIA went from 15.7 to 18.2. I think at this point, some of those mega tech stocks like Google, like Facebook, they really start to shoot up in price, and obviously now they're at all-time highs. So that's probably the reason for that nice gain. And the Vanguard GA slowly starting to compound. So that's now at 15.2 from where it was at 13.4. The work shares went from 11.9 to 13,180, and now you can start to see I've started to include some of the Coinbase numbers because that's numbers I've actually documented. So I've got currently 11,114, and as I mentioned before, around 80% is in Bitcoin, while the rest is in Ethereum. The trading 212 is still at zero because we only recently started that ISA. I've started a new trading 212 portfolio update series on this, so if you haven't checked that video, go check it out. And lastly, that Vanguard ISA was at £20,000. So just before the end of the tax year, we just chucked in a lump sum of £20,000 into that Vanguard ISA and chucked it into an all-world ETF. So that's that £20,000, kind of maximize that tax shares limit. And that puts the total to a very nice £296,954. So that puts that at a 25% gain from January 2024, which is fantastic, but not entirely accurate because I did have crypto back in January 24. I just don't have the numbers for it, so it's probably more around the 20% range, but again, for 3 months, that is pretty good performance. Last but not least, let's look at the performance for July 24, which obviously is this month. I've made a small tweak to the wording in column F, if you've noticed that, because it's the gains losses for the past update rather than the past month. But that's what I use kind of track that performance when I give you those updates. So starting off with the pension, it went from 132 to 144, so that's a gain of 9%. And when you take a step back, you can really start to see how these numbers really snowball, hence the name of the channel. So back in August 23, it was 106,000, and now in July 24, it's 144. So that's why people say get to that first 100,000, because when you do, that's when compound interest really kicks in. It's not necessarily the performance of a individual stock, because if you have £100 in Palantir and it goes 100%, that's a £100 gain. But if you're talking £100,000 in an ETF and that's 10% every year, that's a £10,000 gain every single year. So my focus is putting as much money as I can into all of these investment vehicles as early as possible to really maximize that power of compound interest. The ISA had an absolutely amazing performance. They went from 86 to 105, so that's a 22% gain. And the main reason for that, again, is Palantir, because it's on an absolute tear. I'm not convinced it's going to stay at these price ranges. So at the minute, it's around the $28 range. We'll see what the next earning call says. But I expect the value of this to probably fall down in the next update. But, you know, I breached £100,000 range in the ISA, so I'm very happy about that. The free trade GIA had a modest increase of 6% and Vanguard 9%. Yeah, the market's just been on an absolute tear. I'm still waiting for some major pullbacks because it almost feels there's too much excitement in the market. So I do have cash on the sidelines. For example, in my ISA, I've got probably around 10% cash. So I'm ready to deploy tactically when we do have those pullbacks. Although I try and stay mostly invested at least 80 to 90% most of the time. The work shares went up 20%, and that's because the general UK market has done quite well, although crypto has taken a bit of a turn down, so that was down 11%. But the small amount of cash I had in that portfolio, which I think it was around £800, I dumped into Bitcoin, so now fully invested in that Coinbase portfolio, and I'm not looking to add any more cash because I just wanted a small slice of the overall portfolio in crypto, and you know that's as much as I want. Next up is the Trading 212 ISA for my spouse. So now you can see we started to add money to this, and this is going to be a main ISA for 24. So I'm hoping to maximize that with £20,000, and we'll see how things inside it perform. And the Vanguard ISA, obviously that's still invested in the All World Index Fund, and that went up 3% in July 24. So that puts the total for July of my entire investment portfolio at £332,652, which is a 12% gain over April 2024. So I know I've talked heavily around my portfolios and performance for the entire video without mentioning actually what are my retirement goals. And I think partly because I'm still trying to figure that out. I'm still in my early 30s and I'd ideally love to retire at 50, for example, but what is that number I need to reach? And I'm still trying to figure that out. So I think for my next month's update, or my next quarter's update, I should say, that's what I'm going to focus on. I'll still give the performance update, but then give my view on actually what do I want from retirement, how much do I need to get there, and my plan. So that's my plan for the next quarter's update.